I'm Melody. Welcome to Author Nation, your go-to resource for becoming a successful nonfiction author, from planning to promotion and everything in between. And today we have an author interview. I am interviewing Evelyn McKelvie, author of The Executive Horse, which is a really interesting book. I have a copy myself, and I'm very excited about it. I love horses. And I'm just going to start by reading you a little bit of a review of this. And this review is by Chris Irwin, and he's a widely respected, internationally renowned equine trainer, a clinician and author, and this is what he had to say. With great pleasure and deep appreciation, I truly savored each sentence of The Executive Horse. A delightful page-turner, Evelyn McKelvie's beautifully written odyssey flows seamlessly with profound insights for personal and professional change. And we are going to learn more about Evelyn, her book, and some tips that she has for other authors. Here we go. Hi, Evelyn. How are you today?
I'm very well, Melody. Hi, and thank you very much for inviting me to do this.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I'm very excited about this. So I know from your book that you have an interesting history with horses, and at one point you did ride horses, but I believe now you do not. And I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about that.
For sure. I did start out riding horses late in life when I was not quite 50. And I'd always wanted to take that Banff vacation on horseback. And I found myself in a situation where I had the extra time and money, and I signed up for lessons. And so I did learn to ride. I rode for many years, and I eventually ended up owning my own horse and learned to communicate and ride well with him. He was a senior though, and when I had to put him down, I found after being in a relationship with a horse that I knew so well, I found it a little more challenging to ride horses that were like strangers or horses that I didn't know. And so gradually I stopped riding them, but I'd already begun to have a relationship with them on the ground, which is the way I work with horses and with my clients. And I was surprised to find when I started doing that my relationship with horses was much more intimate. And so I still, in fact, as much as I'd love to ride again, I still really love and cherish the experience that I have with horses just from the ground.
Oh, that's really interesting. Can you elaborate on what it is that you get out of a relationship with the horses?
For sure. It's complex. And it's very much, well, first of all, let me say, from a scientific perspective, horses are very large animals. I mean, I worked with full-size horses, not ponies or minis. So they're usually, taller than I am. And they have usually 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 pounds. And they have a very large heart, and they have a very large electromagnetic field around their hearts. And this sort of heart energy is something that's being explored a lot more these days, and measured, in fact, as well. And what's showing is that when we're around horses, we entrain to their physiology, and their heart rate rhythm, their heart rate and pulse are very close to ours, as well as their body temperature. So it's very much a seductive kind of process of becoming more relaxed and in tune. And the other major thing that happens is, because they don't have our language, I think it lights up different areas of our brain, and it lights up our whole physiology. And we usually, even people who don't know horses very well, usually walk away from an interaction with a horse feeling better, feeling, more grounded and more at home.
And that's a great segue into how horses in your career are intertwined. And I'd love to hear more about that as well.
For sure. Yes. And in fact, it was a career change that took me to Ontario, which is where I started riding. And I was working in IT, and I had started to notice increasingly that, especially nowadays, that we are really distracted. And that whole business of screen time and trying to multitask, being in a position of on and off as far as our attention goes, and not being really located fully and present in our bodies. I started to notice that quite a bit because I was riding 2 or 3 times a week and going back to the office and just knowing that people weren't in their bodies. And there was a lot of stress and unhappiness in this particular business at this time because of enormous changes that they were going through. And my job was to lead this change, and it was also to help people adjust to what was going on from a technical perspective and from an organizational perspective. And so I became very fascinated about the effects that the horses were having on me and wondering how I could transmit that sort of thing to other people in the workplace. And that's what got me started thinking about doing this sort of work.
Yeah. Humans and change, right? We're not always keen on change.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's move a little bit into the book. So why did you write this book?
Well, I really wrote it as a business card, as they say, an expensive business card. So I guess the book came out, I didn't realize it was 4 years ago now. But I started this practice around 2004, 5, and 6. I finally knew, because I didn't at first, it really wasn't something that anybody that I knew was doing, this kind of coaching people and horses together. And so gradually I discovered that there was this thing called executive coaching, and I realized that was a perfect match for me to combine my knowledge of horses with executive coaching and work from that perspective. So I became an executive coach in 2008 for Royal Roads University. I've been coaching ever since, both with and without horses. But I think in answer to your question, what I started to notice was that working with horses was a way of bypassing all that chatter in our brains in very key areas. So communication, body language, leadership skills, relaxation and relationship building, balance, perspective, all of these kinds of things that are so important to us in our workplace relationships. Key among them also being emotional self-awareness. And so I started to develop programming that would meet those objectives and started to work with people and practice, and then offered workshops and started offering one-to-one as well. And at the time, this would have been 2008, 2009, this kind of work was really not at all known or understood, especially in Canada. It was becoming more prevalent in the US and in Europe, but not known at all in Canada. So when I told people what I did, they were really like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I realized no amount of website articles or pictures was going to get the message across. So I decided to write the book and explain it and use case studies and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's excellent. And it seems like if you look at the book, The Executive Horse, it seems like it might have a very narrow subject matter. And it does in some regards because it is about horses. But if you think about the application of what's in the book across the human spectrum, it's actually quite wide. And I would say the audience could be a wide range of people wanting to learn certain skills. Can you tell us a little bit more about the book? Sure.
Yes, you're right. On the face of it, I think the book might look like it's, well, I don't need an executive coach. I don't want an executive coach. But what the fundamental message is that we are mammals and we've forgotten that. And we're very similar to horses in terms of mammals. We're also similar to dogs and cats, but dogs and cats have become so familiar to us, we don't even notice that similarity. We focus mostly on the differences. So what I found was that all of those aspects of relationship and things that are very important and widely discussed today, like mindfulness, meditation, self-awareness, presence, all of those kinds of things are critical in relationships with horses. And we're very unconscious of those things. And so working with horses is one way to really make us conscious of our level of self-awareness, our level of impact on others. What is my presence saying to others at this moment? And all of the aspects of emotional self-awareness and all of the aspects of emotional intelligence.
Yeah. I love that. So if your book makes a promise, if I go into the store and I pick it up and I take a look and I read the back and the front and I might skim through it, what is the promise that you're making to readers with this book?
That's a really good question. And I think, I was just rereading it to get ready for this interview because I haven't read it for a while. And I think the promise is that it'll likely open your eyes a great deal to the presence of sentience in other beings, for one thing. It may also open your eyes to the similarities that we share with other mammals and with other beings. And these are topics that are so much more discussed openly and widely in this day and age. They weren't at the time that I wrote the book, even 4 years ago. So the promise is that it's going to give you a new perspective on who we are and our relationship potentially with other creatures, in this case, particularly horses. But that relationship and openness to understanding another creature and learning how to speak the other creature's language will really create a huge opening in your awareness of who we are and how we live on this earth.
I love that. I really love that. I do want to move into kind of the book journey and talk about your writing, but I just want to make a little comment before we go on. So I grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
So I've had so many animals in my life. All my life, I've had so many animals. And right now we have cats, plural. And I really enjoy watching them maneuver with each other, negotiate their relationship with each other.
Yeah.
Sharing space, both wanting the same chair, even meal times, and also their relationship with us. I just find that really fascinating. And, I get to do that daily at home with the cats, but with horses, it's not something I get to do very often. And so that's, it would be a completely different experience, even for me. And I grew up, I had a pony, but even now I've been away from the farm for so long. When I interact with horses, it's such a very different experience. So I love it. Your book's amazing. I do want to get onto the book journey. I just wanted to say that it's just very exciting what you're writing about and how it really applies to the human world and how we forget how much their world, and if we watch them and how they interact, what we can learn from them.
Yes.
Yeah, cats, dogs, dolphins, horses. So I'd like to talk about your book journey. And I guess my first question is, do you consider yourself a writer or an author?
Well, I do consider myself an author now, and I'm starting to work on my next book.
Ooh.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess I never really thought of myself as a writer until I had to put up a website and write about this. And well, of course, I've had to write in work situations quite a bit. And so I can write, but I didn't think of myself as a writer until I started this book. And I'd been told your writing is great. So I had a little bit of positive feedback when I started to write the book. And what I had done was after sessions with horses and with clients, I found myself bursting to write about them. And so I had accumulated a lot of articles even before I thought of writing a book. Accumulated a lot of articles, and they just came sort of flowed through me, channeled. And I didn't even feel like I wrote them, but I recognized that there was some skill to that and that I had some ability. So that helped a lot.
Yeah. And you had some content, it sounds like.
Yes. Yeah. I had quite a bit of content. In fact, that was the big challenge, was how to stitch it together. Yeah,
and that's a really good point. A lot of times entrepreneurs don't realize how much content they have. And when they do end up pulling it out, you can't just throw it together. You do need to stitch it together in a way that makes it work. Yeah. So you talked about the book as a business card. And so you've done one and you're working on another. What are some of the things you've learned along the way? What are you going to do differently now? And what worked well then?
Well, certainly when I did it the first time, I had never heard of beta readers. I thought you get an editor, but I didn't realize how many different kinds of editors there are. And so I know now that what I need to do is approach it from a very different angle. I thought, you wrote the pages, you got them edited, and then you published. But, there is a lot more to it than that. I think the other thing is to give myself enough time to work out how it gets stitched together. I mean, some books may be easier in that respect because there may be some sequential nature to the story you're telling. But in my case, I was going back and forth from talking about speaking horses to horses, talking about my clients' situations, and trying to connect my clients at the workplace, because I was still working in an IT environment at the time. So trying to make it relatable to people in the workplace as well.
Right. And so how are you going to approach it differently this time in that regard? Are you going to look at what content you have and stitch it together? Or are you going to make a plan? Like, what is your best advice for that? What have you learned, and what's your best advice that you're going to apply to yourself in the next book?
Well, the next book is going to be very different. It's and so it's a piece that I've mostly completed, certainly the chapter headings and the theme of each chapter. What my next stage is, I'm reaching out to some people who have specific knowledge that I want to interview, and not necessarily to quote them in the book, but I need to generate a lot more current ideas about the topic. And then I think I do need to have beta readers. I want to have beta readers. I want to get their feedback. I want to use a more professional process and hopefully get a professional publishing house and a good marketing plan. And that's, when I wrote this book, I didn't think about a marketing plan, and I didn't even want to do a marketing plan because that wasn't the purpose.
Right. And so when you thought of it as a business card, did you think about meeting people and like handing them a copy of the book?
Yeah.
And then they would read that and think, I want to work with her, and call you?
Yeah. Or they would understand the work at least. So when people were thinking about it, I could give them the book, or they could buy the book and understand how it might relate to them and their teams. So I've worked with, teams, leadership teams and other teams. And from that perspective, I think they understand what to expect a little bit.
Okay.
In terms of venturing into that realm.
So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it's not like taking your team out to do a round of golf or a zip line experience. It's very different. It's much more a learning experience and relationship building experience.
Right. So that, in the sense, the book did help with that. It did help give that overview before people decided to work with you. And so they knew kind of what they were getting into, what to expect, what the outcomes might be. So that it worked well. What you did before worked well for what you're wanting, but now you're wanting something different.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've created a plan for the book, like an outline, an overview or an outline, along with like chapter headings and some subheadings within the chapters.
Yeah.
And now you've got that overall flow and the themes all in place.
Yeah.
You're looking to build that content by either pulling in content you have, going out and doing interviews or research, and putting that into the book. And when you have something that you think is going to be worth reading, you're going to give it to beta readers, who are again going to give you a whole different set of feedback. Because one thing is doing research in the topic, and the other thing is giving it to somebody who doesn't really know the topic to see if it resonates with them.
Exactly.
That's what beta readers will do for you. Is that correct?
Exactly. And I relied heavily on one person that I knew who was a very intelligent and good writer.
Right.
And a good editor, from the perspective of catching grammatical punctuation and those kinds of things. And she knew me and she knew my work. So that was very useful. I relied heavily on her for this first book.
Right.
The next book is not going to be as robust, probably, in terms of the content. Like, I was trying to bridge a big divide in this first book.
Yes.
The next book is not working from that place of trying to bridge a big divide.
Yeah. And that right there is a good point. You know, as an author, you need to know, is this something that's going to be automatically accessible to everyone? Or do I need to build a bridge to bring them to where they need to be so that this can be accessible to them? And knowing where you're coming from and knowing how it will affect your audience or how close they are to it already is actually a really good point right there, Evelyn. Do you have any other kind of tips or hints that you want to pass on to new authors?
Well, I will say this: every author that I know who's completed a book on their own, and I'm not speaking about the people who write a chapter in a book where there's a group of people together, but if you're writing this on your own, it's a lonely experience. It's like birthing a baby, and the last month is really painful. I know that almost everybody I've talked to has said the same thing, you know, and so I think you need a good support group around you, even if they're not your readers. Other people who have gone through or are going through the same process can help you stay focused on getting to that end, because, oh God, it was so painful. I had set myself a deadline and I really wanted to take it to that deadline, and it almost killed me. Yeah, but because I had to rewrite the book in the last 3 weeks.
Oh, no.
I had, I didn't have a great editing, and from that I mean a content type of editor, and so I gave it to a friend close to the end, and I was like, oh, I hope this isn't a big mistake. And she was an author and a professional editor and publisher, so she sent me back some fantastic advice and said, you have to move these things this way. So I had to sit down and rewrite it and restructure it in the last couple of weeks. So that was really stressful. So do all that farther ahead.
Great advice, right? Get a developmental editor or content editor early on before you've stitched it together so that you can just do it once.
Yeah.
Not that you'll only write and revise once, but that so that you can do that big piece only once. That is really, really great advice.
Yeah.
So where can people find you, and where can people find your book?
Well, my book is available on Amazon, and it's also available on my website. If you want a signed copy, I'm happy to take orders on my website. There is a place there to put in an order, and also to say what you want. If you want it for a gift for somebody else, there's a text field for you to enter what you want me to say in that inside of the book. So my website and my business name is equinecoach.ca.
Okay.
All one word, equinecoach.ca.
And we'll put that in the description as well.
Great.
And actually, I think this would be a great book for a university graduation gift. Just because it talks so much about leadership, and this is what they're looking for, right? They're stepping out of the role of student into the role of, a workplace where they have that, potential to become leaders, and their emotional intelligence is going to make a big difference. So I think it's a great gift.
Well, thank you.
For kind of starting out your career to kind of get a good start on it. So yes, I will put all of that in the description.
Thank you.
Do you have a small piece you'd read to us before we go?
I do. And I'm going to read to you from chapter 3, which is the topic is presence.
Ah, wonderful.
And so again, it works with these ideas of experiences with the horses and how they inform who we are and what's going on. So it starts with a quote: "The most precious gift we can offer others is our presence." And I don't know how to say this. He's a Tibetan monk, P. Nat Han, I think. So it's called Working with Matt. I was working with 2 clients who were wanting to practice their equine body language. We were going to work with a horse named Matt in a round pen. I knew the horse quite well. He was a well-adjusted, reliable guy, and although there was nothing complicated about his personality, there was something complicated about his breed. He was a Tennessee walker, a gaited horse whose movement was difficult for many people to ride. Matt was also highly sensitive to the physical stress that a rider might feel while struggling to find a way to sit his particular way of going. Matt's response to the stress was simple. He eliminated it by dumping his rider. It wasn't long before Matt had a reputation, and like many horses who are a challenge to people, He was at risk of becoming an agricultural byproduct. Matt was lucky because he met a woman who knew how to understand his special needs, and with time and attention, and because she knew how to speak his language, he ended up in the right job with the right person. Being a calm and respectful horse, he was well suited to working on the ground in the kind of work I do. Both clients were going to have some one-on-one time in the round pen with Matt. The first client went in and using some basic body language and energetic self-control that I would have taught him, was able to have Matt stand as she approached him, was able to send him on, leading from behind, using just her energy and body language, and finally was able to have him walk with her shoulder to shoulder around the round pen for a few circles. Matt spoke to her with his ears, his licking and chewing lips, his low head, and his calm, slightly lifted tail, letting her know that he was enjoying her presence. She was elated when she was done. The second client went in and slowly walked towards his shoulder. Matt froze. He didn't stand there waiting for her to join him. He froze. He was on alert, ears swiveled towards her as she walked towards him. His eyes widened and had a look of stress as his tail clamped slightly. The client arrived at Matt's shoulder and stood there for a few minutes. Then she started to ask him to walk forward with her. Matt would not move. His behavior was completely unlike the way he had interacted with client number one. I asked the client what was going on for her. She indicated that nothing was going on, everything was fine. I was at a distance so that I could not tell how her breathing was or see the micro expressions in her face. She seemed to be, quote, fine, and yet she could not get Matt to walk with her. She continued to ask. Suddenly, he leapt forward and walked purposefully around in front of her. As they drew nearer to where I was standing, I asked again what was going on for the client. She confessed that the knots in her stomach had softened and now she was feeling less afraid. I coached her to breathe and relax as much as possible, and eventually Matt was able to slow down and be with her as they walked around the pen. Horses are so adept at feeling what is going on for others. They never fail to show us what their experience of us is. Despite the fact that I couldn't see the fear and stress in the client's body, Matt could feel it at a distance and was unable to relax and be with the client until she could acknowledge her feelings and begin to let them go.
Thank you, Evelyn. That's amazing. It's amazing how horses can read us and we don't think we're readable. Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciated speaking with you today.
Thank you.
Yes, and for everyone out there, if you're interested in the book and Evelyn's work, please go to the description. You'll find everything you need there, along with her tips and tricks that she's given us today. And if you've liked the video, if it's helpful to you, give us a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and subscribe. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Melody.
Bye-bye.